Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Star Trek Adventures, the Warp Onyx campaign, and we are continuing with the story of security crewman Archibald on the USS Enterprise NX-0, commanded by Captain Archer. All right, so at this point, we are on the ship, and the crew of the Enterprise NX-0 has decided to continue their mission to take Klang to the Klingon homeworld, right? At this point, they have 24 Ferengi on the ship, and they have a very tense situation. Klang got up. He badly injured the merchant captain Sov of the Ferengi. He is responsible, depending on how you count it, for 44 Ferengi deaths. And the Ferengi, there are 24 Ferengi on the Enterprise NX-01 that don't know he's on board. And Klang is currently in, excuse me, he is in the brig, okay? Now, at this point, the crew, so Sato begins to research where they can drop off the Ferengi. Because keeping them on board the Enterprise NX-01, when the Klingon who is mostly responsible for the death of 44 Ferengi, who are good, friends and family of theirs, is just a recipe for disaster, right? So Sato gets on the communications bandwidth and determines that the best place to drop off the Ferengi before they leave the solar system. By the way, man, our story is going slow, man. It's like at impulse speed, right? In that the Enterprise NX-01 isn't even out of the solar system yet. And then they got to get beyond the Milky Way, and then they got to get to like the Gamma Quadrant or all these different quadrants, right? So quite interesting. So at this point, they're past Saturn, and Sato finds out that the best, who is bridge crew and a main character in Enterprise, right, determines that the best thing to do with the Ferengi is to drop them off at the Ellison Science Station. Okay, so this is a science station that actually orbits the sun on its own orbit, right? And Starfleet says, hey, this is great. Drop off the Ferengi. That will make the situation on the Enterprise much safer. That's great. Definitely want to do that. And then also, Ellison Science Station has been doing research on flora, on extraterrestrial flora, right? And they have samples of this extraterrestrial flora that they found, and that can be transported back to Earth, and that can be utilized to make medicine, right? So win-win, right? So at this point, the Enterprise NX-0 goes to where the Ellison Science Station is. And away team, all right? So first of all, man, oh man, I cannot, thumbs up to Modiphius 2d20. This is a phenomenal. So, okay, Modiphius 2d20 has built a really phenomenal system to run Star Trek. Get this. I have run short campaigns of Star Trek before, but it went okay, but the vibe on this campaign is really strong because there's a synthesis. There's a simpatico between the Dungeon Master and the entirety of the player base, which is just one player, right? But we love Star Trek, right? Whereas before, when I played this, it was like 3 or 4. Actually, I think it was like 5 players, and the players were like, Star Trek, it wasn't their jam, and so I don't think the stories were so robust. But what really blows my mind is there's really this incredible beat, right? Like there's this really sound beat between what it means. The adventures that happen on the starship are really unique and special, and are usually kind of social, or they're like a mystery or a puzzle. They're really unique, and they just have a completely different feel than Away Team, right? And then you hit Away Team, and you have this, really like anything. There's all kinds of different mission types, and Modiphius really did their homework, and they broke it down and helped me understand, me as a dungeon master, understand Star Trek better, right? And so, and the way they did that were lots of ways, but one of the primary ways is all these mission types, right? So one of the things I'm working on right now is I want to just do every mission type in the campaign, right? And so that's kind of a dungeon master goal, for me, running Modiphius 2d20 Star Trek Adventures. I want to finish every different mission type. Right now, it might happen, it might not, because I'm not going to force it into the narrative. If it doesn't naturally fit, of course, I once you start the river of narrative, you have to understand its flow, right? And you can't constantly be, paddling upriver, right? So I'm going to try this. We'll see where it goes. All right. So at this point, there's an away team, right? So security crewman Archibald is going with Corso, and then 10 red shirts, right? Like, I could tell you who they are, but they're red shirts, right? And red shirt, I don't mean that like they're gonna die. It means these NPCs don't have lines, right? They're gonna go, and so basically the whole point is to drop off the Ferengi, right? And pick up the samples. That's what needs to get done, right? So Corso is the leader, Lieutenant Corso, Starfleet Lieutenant Corso, right? Now, we dealt with her before. She was on the Frangula Sphere mission, okay? So, basically, shuttles go over. Actually, multiple shuttles go over to bring over all the Ferengi. And so it's every shuttle in the Enterprise NX-0. And actually, they send out ships from the science station because there aren't even enough, shuttles. And so everybody gets over, and they get into the hangar bay on Ellison Science Station 3. And basically, the science officer comes up, and he's scratching his neck, right? And he's very he looks very tired, right? And he says, "Hey, welcome to Ellison Science Station. You guys are dropping off the Ferengi here, and then you are going to pick up the samples. The samples are being prepared for you right now. They're going to be ready in 3 hours. And we took those 3 hours because we knew that you would need some time to get the Ferengi settled here and get over all the supplies that are needed for them. So we have a 3-hour window here. You guys are welcome on board the ship. We have we have a nice meal prepared for you, and we have a few science officers here who could give you a tour of Ellison Science Station, right?" And so Corso says, "Thank you very much," right? And then at this point also, I should say, actually, I got to back up a little bit, right? So when they're actually loading the shuttles, right, Phlox comes forward, and he comes to security crewman Archibald, and he says, "Listen, I was left off of the manifest to go on the away team, right? And the reason why is the captain really wants me back here. One, Clang the Klingon is still in the brig. There's a lot of tension on board, and your boss is in a coma. And actually, at this point, because of we actually have quite a few people who are injured from the battle that we had with the Ferengi ship, and they were phaser arrays and torpedo, So there's a lot. I'm really needed in medbay, but get this: I don't want to remain in medbay. I want to go on this way mission. And the reason why is these people, this is Ellison Science Station. They don't see a real doctor here very often, and there are some people I can really help. I have all the time in the world to help the people on the Enterprise NX-01, but these people need my help today, right? And so I'm not on the manifest, and I want you to let me on board. I want you to let me on this away team, right? And he doesn't say it directly. It's implied, and these guys are both smart. So he's like, "This is on the back foot, right? Like we gonna do this, we gonna do this on the back foot. Ain't nobody gonna know, right? Like data pads are not gonna be, following where I'm at, right? And because away team lists are made very carefully, right? And it's really important. So, security crewman Archibald, run by the gold player, he's very straight-laced. He really likes to follow orders. So I was shocked. He's like, Phlox, get on board. Get yourself on that shuttle, buddy. You're coming. Right? And Phlox is like, whoa, man. I thought you were going to give me a lot of hassle. And by the way, I'm not saying this in Phlox's voice and in Archibald's voice. I'm just telling you the story quickly, right? I do a little better when I'm running the game, right? But it was really interesting. So basically, and Phlox is like, and Phlox goes, I owe you one, right? And so this is good because now, it's really good to have, a favor owed to you by a main character, right? Like, a character with lines, I'm saying, not a red shirt, so that's pretty cool. And I will say, I struggle with this in Dungeons and Dragons, right? I'm one of those guys who's like, what's the magic item we're getting? What's the monster we're slaying? And a few NPCs will get lines, but this kind of like small time, social interaction, it just comes very naturally in the Star Trek structure, right? And because we have this structure, we literally have, this came in 67, man. We have almost 6 decades of social structure to follow, where that structure really hasn't been built out in Dungeons & Dragons the way it has been in Star Trek, which is pretty incredible, right? So I was really, really excited. I don't know why, but that Phlox scene just really meant a lot to me. So at this point, security crewman Archibald, they get over there, and Corso and Archibald then say, Archibald's like, yo, did you see that weirdness with the science station chief being like super tired and itchy, right? And Corso's like, yeah, that's a problem. Like, so at this point, they start to go into Ellison's, Corso and Archibald, with a few scientists, a few engineers, people just pick up, with the red shirts, right? They go into Ellison Station and they're keeping their eye out as they're being taken to get the samples, the extraterrestrial flora, right? And by the way, the red shirts are taking care of getting the Ferengi dropped off, right? Oh yeah, I also have to back up a little bit more. Sorry. Okay, so they're going to get the sample. I'm going to go. And then at this point, Mayweather comes up to Archibald and says, and he was helping get the Ferengi set, but he actually breaks off from the Ferengi and he runs over to Archibald and he said, hey, I wanted to. Oh yeah, you know what? So Mayweather has a quick word with him, right? Before they go get the extraterrestrial flora. So at this point, they're going to get the extraterrestrial flora, and as they go through, they're looking at all the people on the station, and half of them have this itchiness and this tiredness, sunken eyes, shadow around their eyes, and Corso's like, oh man, this don't look good, right? And so then they start to keep an eye out, what's the source of this sickness, right? So essentially they do an investigation and they finally get into, they get to where the extraterrestrial flora is, and there is a role for an investigation, okay? And I'm still learning the system. So I think that role for investigation was control and science, right, to determine what the source of this is. So they roll, so the security officer Archibald, and finally he breaks through and he is able to talk to this, he's able to have a good, steady talk with one of the scientists that's keeping the extraterrestrial flora, and he says, listen man, we've been studying this extraterrestrial flora, but there's a lot of it on this ship, and we weren't able to secure it all. And some of the scientists figured out that this is a powerful stimulant, right? And some of the crew have started to make recreational substances out of this, and half the people on this station are addicted to this new drug that's been made with the extraterrestrial flora, right? And so Lieutenant Corso and security crewman Archibald are like, uh-oh. And so immediately they begin to look around, right? And then they can and then with more investigation, they're able, and by the way, sorry, like they're actually, investigation is not really a thing in Modiphius 2d20, but I'm a dungeon master, right? My world is Dungeons and Dragons, and so sometimes I'll just use Dungeons and Dragons skills to kind of speed the tale up. So I did want to, and a super skilled, a game master from Modiphius' Star Trek Adventure will be able to convert these effortlessly. But I've been running D&D since 1982, and I've even been running 5e for 10 years. So I appreciate your patience with me, just kind of shortcutting and saying the names from Dungeons and Dragons. So they do another investigation, and they immediately find 2 drug dealers, right? And Corso's like, oh man, I gotta secure this flora, and I think you need to go and she says, why don't you go deal with those the drug dealers who are following us, right? So security crewman Archibald is like, I don't want these drug dealers to stop getting this flora sample, right? And also Corso and Archibald are like, man, we might have to make a decision. We may not be able to drop off the Ferengi here at all. This whole place is, like infested with drug dealers and drug addicts, right? Like this might not be a good home for the Ferengi, right? So now, they're in the middle of it, and so at this point, Archibald goes off with 3 of the drug dealers, and his plan is to get more information. They take him back to a dark room, and actually he goes to one of the drug dealers and he's like, hey, listen, I've had some really, it's tough being on that starship. It gets boring on some days. Do you guys have anything that could make it a little more fun, right? And so he gives this attempt to buy recreational substances. And they're like, yeah, we got you covered. So they take him to this dark room, right? And and he's like, okay, here's some Starfleet credits. And they're like, we don't want your jank Starfleet credits. We want Ferengi. We saw those Ferengi. We want gold plus platinum, right? Your your Starfleet credits are no good here. And 1 bar, okay, of that gold plus platinum, which you have access to, because since you have access to all the crates, that's going to do the deal, and we'll give you enough of this for a year, right? So he's like, no, right? Like, and then at that point, it goes south, and they get into a phaser battle. This is the first lethal ranged combat in our campaign. It took forever to figure out the combat. It was outrageously complicated, right? But we did it, and we were able to get through it. And security crewman Archibald lethally fired 2 phaser shots and killed two of the henchmen, and then switched his phaser and then took a shot from the leader, right? Which did 4 points of damage to him out of 12 hit points, and not enough to injure him, right? So kind of like a graze to his arm with a lethal phaser, right? And then get this, security crewman Archibald switched his gun to stun and hit the last guy and knocked him out clean, right? And so was able to essentially gunslinger style these guys and take them out, suffering one phaser shot himself. And it's not an injury, right? He suffered phaser damage. Injuries are a specific thing within the game, within Star Trek Adventures, which I will explain at some point. But it was really exciting. And now he has this, and so essentially he has this guy defeated, and we're going to leave it there.